So in this laboratory, we're basically exploring different parts of project configuration. And so let's talk a little bit about the header files. Let's bring up an example of a header file. For instance, we definitely have some header files here, so I'll just arbitrarily show you one of the header files. So header files are plain text files, of course, that contain declarations of functions and constant variables. They may also include other header files. Function declarations are functions without a body. So these here clearly are declarations of different functions in this specific header, and they are even placed inside the class. But these are declarations of member functions of this class named shader. But this would be an example of a function that is declared outside of any class. So this is just called a free function named load data from file. Once the header is included in the program, you can call this function. Basically, the idea of function declaration is that compiler has enough information on how to generate a call into the function. There is no definition of this function, but the function call, the instructions that are required to make this function call, can be generated by the compiler. But of course, we still need the definition of the function, the place where the function has to define its actual steps. So there are a couple of possibilities here where this function can be defined. One possibility is that we implement this somewhere in a C++ file and compile. Okay, so we provide the definition ourselves. And the second possibility is that this function is written by somebody else and exists in already compiled binary form inside a DLL, inside some dynamic library, like we had here in our example. What is the difference? In the first situation where we provide our own function definition, no additional steps are required because the linker will find the actual location of the function and be able to link everything very nicely. If the function is already pre-built and is located somewhere outside of our executable file, we need to tell the linker where that DLL function, DLL file, and of course it's the actual function is. So the way you do it, you specify a path to the library file in additional library directories and additional dependencies of your linker configuration. So we can go to our project settings, project properties right here, and under linker, in my case, it is in the general section. These additional library directories are specified right here. So we can actually try to edit this, and it'll bring up what this library directory is actually specifying here. Generally speaking, I'm just showing you how this can be done on your part, but you really don't have to make any changes here because everything is already pre-configured as we begin executing our laboratory exercises. I just want you to be aware of these steps that are taking place when you need to configure a project like this. And where the DLL files themselves are, in our case, I already mentioned, they're located in the same directory where the executable file is generated. So there are two possibilities to switch between the between the debug and release, and it depends where this output is going. If our executable fails to find a specific DLL, we get a system error that signals that there's some kind of misconfiguration or something missing that needs to be addressed. So the library file is a file that contains the binary code for the linker to link the code during its generation of an executable image. So the lib file contains indirect references to DLL functions. They're like binary header files for the linker. Just like header files that we use for our C++ compiler, lib files are sort of like header files for the linker to locate functions. So we can open this Visual Studio project that already is pre-compiled, and this is the path on my system. So I have CBCC labs, and under labs there is lab 1, and there's a solution file. So let's give this a try. I will actually first of all, I prefer to clean my solution before closing solution, then close what I have right now opened and go to File, Open Project. And I'm already pointing to my GL262 labs, but basically here we need to go under lab 1, right? So lab 1, and here we have our solution. I'm going to click Open. And since this solution was built with earlier version of Visual Studio, we get this prompt to retarget or upgrade to the current version. You just click OK here and make sure that you don't get any errors in your output. So this was upgraded, and we can go ahead and say build solution. All right, so we just build the solution and see what comes out. So normally you don't want this to fail, and that's the good outcome right here. So when you compile your program, all CPP files are compiled into object files, and all object files and lib files then are linked together and written into the executable file. So in this project, I have one file that is part of our solution. So if I go to View, Solution Explorer, and go open the source files right here, you will see that we have this source file right here, and there are some header files included at the top. And when it's compiled into the object file. So here our output showing us that the object file was generated, and then the objects and library files are linked together and written into an executable file by the linker. And when we run the program, so right now, once I built, you can see that these are the files that I just built, result of my build right here. The DLL files will be located in the same directory. That's one of the sure ways to keep the DLLs available to an executable, by simply keeping them in the same folder. And the rest of this laboratory is showing us how to create our own project. But before we go over these options, I just want to make sure that we can actually run this program. So I'll just go to debug and start without debugging, and this is a very simple program that's displaying a red triangle on the screen. And there's also some console output generated for us, which we can use for debugging our code and placing some tracing in this window. So here we have the window that says triangle and draws just a single triangle, the simplest drawing that you can generate. Okay, so this seems to be working fine.